Hi everybody, it's Andrea from Chronic Matters. I thought I would come today with a video for POTS, Postural Orthostatic Tachycardia syndrome. And I'm gonna guess, unless you have this yourself, or like one of your friends, coworkers or something has it, you are unfamiliar with what it is. I've said before, I'm a registered nurse, and I can tell you that when I got the toilet, like long lack of toilet paper issue, POTS was basically an instantaneous thing to go along with that. And I had really no interaction with POTS previously. I had heard the term in my, through the medical profession, but it wasn't something that was even remotely close to on my radar. All I knew, the very first symptom that I had from POTS was an intolerance to sitting, is actually how it started. When I got the condition, I know that the YouTube algorithm apparently doesn't like people talking about the global issue that we suffered starting in 2020. So that's why I tiptoe around the words, because I don't want my content not to reach the right people just because that's what triggered the illness. And I'm still fighting that illness, but I have very strong subdivisions of that illness, and I want to make sure that, my videos reach the people that maybe would want or need content from someone like myself, maybe just to feel like you're not alone. So I tiptoe around that word, I tiptoe around that subject, and while I suffer greatly with the results of that subject, my personal medical conditions can be broken down into subcategories at this stage because I'm like a year into this, right? So I want to talk about in this video how I came to know that that's what I was dealing with, and the steps that have followed that, and where I'm at now, and where I'm hoping to move in the future, and how it's affected my life, and sort of the ways I've kind of tried to combat the issues and the side effects that come along with this condition, which really, any medical condition is, to me, there's usually something happening, right, in one of the body systems. But for somebody who is suffering from any medical condition, really it's the subset of symptoms that are the problem. And it's really about treating symptoms in a lot of cases. A lot of syndromes, a lot of things that can go wrong in the body don't necessarily have anything, they're not curative, they're just something that you're gonna have to live with the symptoms. And so for me, that's what POTS is. And POTS has some really nasty side effects from a medical standpoint, and it really takes a fine balance, and I'll get into that in this video, and some of the reasons that having POTS is not as simple as one might be. Like, they see, if somebody else sees you, oh, you're struggling, you might get a little dizzy with standing, you probably have to sit down a lot. I've been known to lay down on the spot if I stand up and my body says no, which it does a lot. But inside the body, in a cardiac sense, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes, and choosing treatment options is a little bit more complex than one would think maybe it would be from the outside. So the very first symptom I ever had of this condition was an intolerance to sitting up in bed. I would liken it to when you stand up way too quickly and you have a blood pressure issue, the like orthostatic component of it, an intolerance, a blood pressure intolerance. And so sometimes, and this is very common for a lot of people, more common if it's a side effect with a drug that you might be taking, but standing can cause, you know, the dizziness, your world might go black, you might get ringing in your ears, things might start to spin, and that's quite normal for people. You know, you could be having a bad day, maybe you haven't eaten enough, maybe it is a side effect of a medication you're taking, but that was the feeling that I got just from sitting in bed. And at that point I was suffering with the onset of my lack of toilet paper in the house, and everybody else in my family was also suffering with it. So, you know, days come and go and I'm struggling to sit and I'm struggling to stand up. Most of us know the direction to like your bathroom, the nearest bathroom. If you go, maybe you wake up in the middle of the night and you know the pathway because you don't want to turn the light on. I would basically stand to go to the bathroom, and I do have a bathroom in my bedroom, so my body knows the way to go, and I would have to brace myself as I would move. Getting to the toilet was quite the accomplishment. If I still got to the toilet, being able to hear, that was an accomplishment. If I was able to get there and the room wasn't black, then that was good. And sometimes I had to stop and lean over the sink and like hold on to something on my way to the bathroom. And at that point I had no idea that this was POTS. I was still kind of like mid-fighting the condition, and I got it later, like I got it in April of 2022. And you know, that was pretty late into things. And even though I've said before, like my husband worked in the emergency room, he didn't bring it home or anything. It was actually my daughter who brought it home from school at one point. So I got it fairly like late into the start of it, because it was 2022 and you know, it started in 2020. So I had a small child at the time, because as of April 2020, I gave birth to my third living child. And so, you know, I was at home and I had a young child, like my baby was, you know, 2 or not quite 2 at the time. I can't remember exactly. I think she had just turned 2. Oh, right. We missed her birthday party because we were home sick. She was fine, so she left and she went to grandma's house and had her birthday party there. Like they only live an hour and a half away, but we couldn't go, the rest of us. So in any case, that's neither here nor there. I reached the 5-day mark. I kept calling in sick to work. And then at around the no, it was past that actually. I think I was 2 weeks into it, and I had spoken to my boss, and she said, well, as long as you're 5 days past the onset, and as long as you no longer have a fever, then you can return to work. And I remember saying, like, no, it's not that. Like, I can't even sustain walking down to the next bedroom beside the master bedroom because I'm unable to maintain standing or walking or anything. And I couldn't lean over my daughter's crib. I couldn't sit to put her to bed. And while my heart felt like it was pounding outside of my body, I was really not trying to label any symptoms or anything at that point in time. So let's say like a month goes on or 2 months go on, and I've basically been bedridden this entire time, unable to sit for more than 2 or 3 minutes at a time, still I was really happy when I was able to walk the long hallway upstairs of our house to the playroom. That was like a big accomplishment for me, being able to make it down there without passing out, right? Because of course, unbeknownst to me at the time, my resting heart rate was over 100, and I used to be quite athletic, and when I was athletic, my resting heart rate was between 50 and 60, so quite a healthy resting heart rate, and it felt like my heart was pounding outside of my chest, but I still wasn't counting my heart, like my beats per minute or anything like that. I was just trying to breathe through and go slow. At this point, I had a lot of brain fog. I wasn't thinking clearly. Needless to say, I was not safe to return to work. So I explained that and I went on short-term disability. And this continued. It just never really got better. And I had to take my daughter to her pediatrician for some things that she was going through, and I didn't look well. I think it was pretty obvious at the time that I wasn't doing well. And so her physician kind of turned and started talking to me and had said, well, have you tested yourself for POTS? And I went, no. He's like, well, go do the at-home test for POTS. And if you're unaware, I'll give you a quick overview of what that is, but it can be done at home. It's a little bit better if you do have a blood pressure monitor. You get a little bit more of an understanding of what's going on, but really truly at the base of POTS is not your blood pressure, it is your heart rate. So he explained to me how to do the at-home POTS test. I'd never really come in contact with it before. I'd worked with the geriatric population, so it wasn't really something that anyone in the geriatric population dealt with or whatever. So he told me what I needed to do. I needed to go home, lay completely flat for 5 minutes, and that just allows your heart to get down to its resting heart rate, and that gives you an understanding of your baseline. And then what you do is you stand up very still and you measure your heart rate at like minute 1, and then, well, it depends. They started at the cardiologist, they were doing it differently. They were doing like every 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and so on. Whereas I did it 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And if at any point during that test, your heart rate deviates greater than 30 points. So for me, with my resting heart rate of 100, that would be 130. And so I did this, and my resting heart rate was exactly 100. And within standing up, I believe I was in the 160s, maybe 170s for my heart rate, which is above my 95% capacity or 90% capacity for my heart rate, for my body. So clearly my heart was in distress. At that point, I didn't do a blood pressure that went along with it. But instantaneously, I had much higher deviation and an abnormal heart rate. And instantaneously, I knew that I was positive for POTS. And so I phoned my family physician. And at this point, you know, he's got people who are dealing with a long shortage of toilet paper. But, you know, like there's not a lot of answers. It's unclear the best form of treatment. I think this might have been around the time when, you know, people were mocking Donald Trump for him saying, well, everybody should just take ivermectin. Anyway, we didn't know what to treat me with. So he sent a referral off to the cardiologist. And I got in with the cardiologist fairly quickly compared to, you know, the rest of Canada, maybe. Like I got in pretty quickly. So I'm not really sure what he wrote down on the referral, or if that even played a role and I just happened to get in. So I speak to the cardiologist, and I show up in the morning to do a cardiac stress test. And that's where they, actually, we did an echocardiogram first to basically check everything in my heart. It's like a heart ultrasound, and see if there's any abnormalities. Do I have backflow of blood in any portions of my heart, anything like that. So I did that first. Then I went in to do the cardiac stress test, and they put all the leads on you, like the little sticky leads that you put on. And then they put you on a treadmill. Well, I showed up. It was the first day that I had my electric wheelchair. And so I'm coming in with my electric wheelchair, and, he's asking me questions like, why are you in a wheelchair, right? Like, you're here for a stress test. We know that I need to get onto this treadmill, and I'm going to be doing activity, right? Like, that's the portion of the test that I was signed up for. So, I must not have a spinal injury that stops me from doing that. Otherwise, I would have told them, and we would have changed the way that we did the stress test, right? We would have done a chemical stress test and given me a drug to elicit my heart's response. And obviously I hadn't said, hey, I need another option, right? So he kind of looks at me like, what's going on? So we chat a little bit more. I say, this is the first day I've had this wheelchair. I cannot sustain physical activity at all. I'm going to do my best on the treadmill, and we'll have to see like what happens from there. So they hook all the leads up. He's a wonderful man. He goes, okay, so like, when did this start? And I said, oh, when, I got such a lacking in toilet paper. And he's like, well, you must have been having these symptoms prior to getting sick. And I said, well, I mean, I had the normal orthostatic hypotension, where, your blood pressure drops and everything gets dizzy, like I explained before, but nothing abnormal. Like, my blood pressure does tend to run either like regular to the low side. And so, like, if I haven't eaten yet and I've had a prolonged time where I haven't eaten, I'm gonna feel it if I stand up too quickly. But nothing like this. This was night and day. This was the very first day that I got sick. I got POTS along with it. And so this was his first, even 2 years into the pandemic, this was the first sort of time that he was being confronted by the fact that this was a result of getting sick. And it didn't come from something that, I mean, maybe I was predisposed to have it, but it didn't come prior to this. And there's lots of studies now that have people coming in contact with this condition, POTS, post getting sick and post that viral load. And I think at the time it just hadn't really sort of caught up to him. Now, I'm a full year later, this is 2023, and he does seem to have an idea of this being connected to, the worldwide toilet paper shortage. So in any case, I get on and I do the stress test, and I have osteitis pubis, but at this point, that specific diagnosis hadn't been made. But I knew that walking was very difficult for me anyway, but we're gonna give it a try because this is first round testing. And I failed the test. So it's not that I couldn't continue, it's that my heart rate didn't fluctuate the way that it was supposed to fluctuate. And I flat out told the cardiologist, like, I have POTS. And he said, well, like, what makes you think you have POTS? And so I told him, I did the at-home test, and he said, okay, well, we're gonna do basically the same test again with one of our clinicians, and we'll go from there, and I'll follow up with you in about a year. I was like, okay. All right, you're gonna get an answer. I mean, in the medical field, it's kind of funny because I knew that a year didn't mean a year. As soon as he saw what the results came back with, it's like no news is good news. So he's kind of planning like, oh, no news is going to be good news and I'm not going to reach out to you and I'm not going to talk to you again for another year and we'll retest and see how you're doing. I knew that the second that he said, we're going to do a POTS test and I'll see you in a year, I knew that was not going to be the case, that he would be seeing me much sooner than a year. And the fact that I'm making this video is basically a testament of the fact that he saw me multiple times before 1 year. In any case, I came in, I think about a week later, and I did the official POTS test. Now, I did not do the table POTS test if you're familiar or if you've done it yourself. Some facilities have a table where they can just incline you or, yeah, like they'll tip you upside down basically on a table where you don't actually have to lay down for the 5 minutes and then tolerate standing. You can have your heart elicit this response by being on a specialized table, but that's not the situation that I had. So I went in and I did this test and my heart rate deviated significantly. I had a vasovagal moment where at about minute 2, my heart rate dropped. So it went from 150 down to 107, just like that. And my blood pressure tanked with it. And so I think my blood pressure went down to 80/60. And so I managed to stay erect during the test and standing. And then my heart rate jumped back up very, very shortly after this, and my blood pressure went back up with it. The results were so jarring from the test because, again, my resting heart rate was 100. Now, a lot of people who have POTS are going to go into POTS with a normal resting heart rate. So your heart is working more when you have POTS because it's an intolerance to standing. But if your baseline heart rate is already super high, and mine was already like really, really high, and then you jump up to like 160, 170, my heart was outworking what my safe heart rate would be. And so he called me back immediately and he said, okay, this is very clearly POTS, but because it came from the virus, I'm hesitant to immediately give medications to like slow my heart and intervene in that. Because if it came from a virus and it's like, and he gives me medications to correct this, and then my body heals on its own, and like I said, this was sort of new to him, it just not being something that somebody presented with from a random point in their life, and it being very specifically virus related, that I might heal, and then all of a sudden I'm taking a medication that ultimately lowers my heart rate, but it also lowers my blood pressure, because most of our drugs that work on one work on both. It's just the system, right? And so you could tank me, and all of a sudden, maybe my body gets better and I'm on this medication, and instead of being able to catch myself when I feel the symptoms really kick in, I just go down. And then I'm at risk of getting hurt. And so we did not do medication. He said, I want to see you in another 3 months and we're going to repeat the POTS test and see what happens there. So I waited the 3 months. Nothing is getting better. I can barely walk. I can't move my head in space. So I had a major intolerance. Like, one of the things that even when I could now walk down the stairs, and gradually, like, my resting heart rate was not getting better, but the height that my heart rate would peak at was coming down. So over time, my body was getting better in a sense. And so I could ambulate a little bit better around my house. But if I tried to say empty the dishwasher, moving my head in space, having my head, you know, be at this level and bending down to grab a dish out of the dishwasher to put it away in the cupboard, would instantaneously toss me into an episode of, you know, POTS where I would get dizzy. I'd have to sit down exactly where I was. My dog would start to get really, really scared. And you have to remember that along with all of this, I also am dealing with all of my other chronic illnesses and chronic conditions. So as I make videos on the channel, you'll come to know a little bit more about the facets of my chronic illness nature and how they like functional neurologic disorder likes to play with the POTS, which likes to trigger the functional neurologic disorder. And then with movement and lack of, you know, muscle tone now, because we're at a year and I'm so deconditioned. As a chronic illness person in general, you become deconditioned to what you might have been before. You lose muscle tone, you know, like, I mean, even taking one full day of rest and just laying in bed, you lose a significant amount of muscle tone. So having inactivity is really not good for you. So that caused, you know, my osteitis pubis to act up. It caused my thoracic degeneration to be more painful. Like, as I started to lose all muscle within my body because I had such an intolerance to exercise or movement, all these other pieces of the puzzle tacked on. And there's also mind components of this, because through all of this beginning stages where I was learning that I had POTS and how to manage it and that sort of thing, I was also dealing with an inability to read, comprehension issues. Like, I was just, everything was compounded at this time. So my POTS was not isolated to just POTS. Like, it wasn't that, you know, maybe I got a random cold. I happen to be a healthy, you know, 30-year-old and a few woman, and I'm healthy. This is not the case. Like, some people walk into their POTS and that is the case, and it's a little bit more simple. Mine wasn't like that. And so I was starting to get depressed, and the only thing that I could really do was lay in my bed and stare out the window. I couldn't unload the dishwasher. I couldn't use the vacuum. I couldn't lift my children. I couldn't sustain a long conversation with anybody because I would become out of breath. That's a lot of actual work. All these things that you don't necessarily think of as work or as difficult until you're unable to do them. That's sort of where I was at in the journey. And I also, right prior to running out of toilet paper and having such a severe shortage of toilet paper, I had multiple other very traumatic things happen in my life. And it was just really unfortunate timing, and it left me very open to and very susceptible to viral load. My body was not at its healthiest when you're dealing with tremendous amounts of stress. It's just, it stops your body's ability to fight what's coming in to attack it. And so, I mean, it was a perfect storm. So that's when my husband and I decided that we were going to incorporate mobility aids. And I think a lot of people who have POTS at some point do have no choice. If you want to live your life and be part of society, you are going to have to make some changes, and mobility aids is likely one of them. When you have to have a chair at all times because you are at such a risk of falling and hurting yourself and, you know, just basically blacking out or whatever, it's not safe for you to leave the house without being prepared for that. And for me, even sitting brought my heart rate up to 120. So if you think about, you know, a regular baseline heart rate of, even if you're unhealthy, let's just say it's 70, okay? Like, let's not say that you're like an athlete or anything like that, but let's say that you're 70 and that's your baseline heart rate. And, you know, you go to the gym, well, maybe getting your heart rate to 120 is sort of when you start to get a little bit diaphoretic, you're sweating a little bit, you know, you can feel your heart working that little bit more. You're not in like your red zone of your heart. If you follow that type of zones for the heart, you're not in your 80 to 90%, 95% capacity of your heart and what's safe for you to do. But that kind of gives you an idea of what it was like for me just sitting. Sitting was like constantly walking maybe. And so leaving the house was very, very difficult. And so I started using mobility aids to leave the house. And I'm actually gonna do a whole video, I think, just on mobility aids, because I think that's really important. This video is also getting long. We're already at 30 minutes and I've just barely touched the surface of my experience with POTS. So I want to kind of wrap up a little bit of my experience with POTS, and then I will continue on in another video just to kind of break it up a little bit. So in any case, I started using mobility aids to leave the house. I'm leaving the house maybe once a week at that point in time. You know, I'm seeing a therapist, so that might be one of my appointments. At some point along this journey, my husband had to take time off of work. Taking care of me was a full-time job because I couldn't drive. I could not safely drive myself anywhere. I couldn't get myself to appointments, this, that, and the other thing. Before I got my mobility aids, one of them being an electric wheelchair, I couldn't get anywhere on my own. So my husband was taking me around and getting me to all the appointments that I needed to get to. I learned some tips and tricks for dealing with POTS, and what I alluded to earlier in the video is that you have to make some really difficult decisions because some of the solutions for POTS are actually quite dangerous cardiac wise, and it's not what's best for your heart. So, you know, one of the solutions is you want to have as much volume in your blood as possible. You don't want the volume, you don't want hypo or hypovolemia, basically. So too little volume in your blood. And our blood is supported by fluid. So basically, that's when I got this sucker here. It is the minimum amount of water that I am, as a POTS person, supposed to take in a 24-hour period, but it's actually more suggested for me to have, I think it's 1.5 to 2 of these in a day. And so to make things easier on myself, I went out and got a 64-ounce Yeti, and it's my friend. It comes with me pretty much everywhere that I go. But one of the other things that you need to do is increase your salt intake. And you know, in some people's diets, that would be actually fairly easy. If you eat a lot of pre-made foods or whatever, they are loaded with sodium. And so, but that's not good for you. I think the vast majority of us understand that a high sodium diet isn't heart healthy. And so you know, in order to help my heart reduce the workload that it's in currently, I have to do things that over the long term are detrimental to my health. And through chronic illness, you're going to find an awful lot of that. Most conditions, in order to either, you know, sometimes it's really just about quality of life, right? Like if I chose not to treat POTS, I could lay in bed all day for the rest of my life, but I'd have no quality of life. So, you know, just like most chronic medical conditions, quality over quantity has to be really considered. I think this is going to sound really morbid, but I have come to terms with the fact that I will not live as long as likely my husband will. There are enough medications that shorten my lifespan, that cause something negative to happen somewhere else in my life. And that is something that I have to just understand. And even when I spoke to the cardiologist this last week, I've now done 3 POTS tests in between like the first one. So, well, I've done a total of 3 with the cardiologist, because again, he was worried that my heart would go back to normal and then I would have problems by taking the medication. So I received a phone call from him. His office is running quite a bit behind, as to be expected right now. All doctors, you know, like the medical system is really under pressure right now. And so he said, yes, I'm at the point where, you know, your POTS is very obviously POTS, and I'm going to medicate for you. And I want you to understand that the medication is, and that the things, that the tools and the tricks and the tips that I'm going to send you are not what is healthiest for humans in general. And he said, like, you can kind of pick and choose what interventions you want to use based on, you know, what works for you. And he's going to put together a whole thing. Now, like I said, his facility is behind, and it's his nurses who put together all of the pamphlets and everything like that. So I have yet to receive the phone call to go pick up the pamphlets of information telling me all about this condition I already know an awful lot about now at this point, and the prescription for the medication that I will be taking. The prescription that I'll be taking is to reduce my heart rate, and it will have a subsequent lowering of my blood pressure as well. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. I haven't started yet. Right now, I can't really sustain taking in the sodium increases to the rate that POTS would normally suggest that I should. I've always struggled with sodium. It's not easy for me to get in as much as I'm supposed to, but I try to get in as much water as I can. And that is basically my story about how I came into contact with POTS. There is about a 5% chance of, I don't know if I want to call it remission or healing or whatever, but the studies that I found suggest that 95% of people who get POTS at some point in their life, for whatever reason they may get POTS, they will likely have POTS for the rest of their life. So this isn't something that taking the medication is going to heal. It's going to be about balancing the safety of my heart against like the quality and quantity ratios. It's going to be a very delicate balance, because again, you can overcorrect, and those medications put people at risk of falls and then getting hurt from falls. So it's quite a delicate balance. My cardiologist said that he needs to test now for some more rare underlying conditions. And I don't know if that's because he's educated himself further on the, like I said, as the further that we get away from the onset of the toilet paper shortage, the more and more that we see people having POTS as a result of their long toilet paper shortage. And so I'm not sure if he's done research since then and found that there's underlying conditions that we need to check for. I am actually at a point right now where I'm ignoring my health. Not ignoring isn't the right word. I have burnout from all of the work that it has taken the last year to live inside of my body. And that has resulted in me basically being a little bit more lackadaisical and a less, putting pressure on the system to work for me. I'm letting the system move at the pace it wants to move because I have burnout from my chronic conditions. And so when he said I need to do a 24-hour urine collection and I need to go do a whole bunch of blood work, I just took it as it is what it is. I'll do what I need to do when I need to do it. And I didn't even bother asking him what conditions he was looking for, although I did ask if one of the underlying conditions he was looking for was mast cell activation syndrome, which I will cover in a future video about mast cell activation syndrome and how I wonder if it pertains to me as well. So I'm gonna wrap up this video here. I'm gonna start it uploading, and I think I'm gonna do a different video today as well because I wanna get some content up for people who are struggling. Maybe you're laying in bed and you've just been told that you have POTS and you're struggling to manage POTS. You've probably been getting, you can find any of the information that you want for interventions towards POTS and really any condition that you've got. But I want to talk about maybe a little bit of like the mental health aspect of all of these conditions and the things that I do to mediate my mental health in and amongst all of these chronic conditions, because I can sit here and tell you all the symptoms I have all day long that you might relate to some of them and not to others, but I want to be able to give actionable steps that may help improve your quality of life while you're battling with chronic illness. So yes, a lot of that's going to include my story, as education on where I'm at, but I also want to talk about actionable steps for healing. So I think I might do a video on actionable steps for healing next. And honestly, it might come in the same outfit on the same couch with the same puppy sitting behind me. So that's it for today or for now. And if you've managed to make it all the way through this video, good for you. Subscribe. If you've got chronic illness, subscribe. At least you'll have somebody walking the path with you. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Bye.